Imagine creating a character so detestable, so universally loathed that the actor playing him quit acting forever because of the hate he received. That is exactly what happened to Jack Gleeson, who played Joffrey Baratheon in Game of Thrones. But here's the thing. Joffrey is not the only villain in George R.R. Martin's arsenal who's left a lasting impression on readers. There's even another Game of Thrones actor who faced real-life consequences because of their character's actions. But more on that later. Love them or hate them, Martin's villains are unforgettable because they're layered, compelling, and deeply human. So how does he do it? How does Martin craft villains so strong that they dominate the story and readers' emotions? In this episode of Story Lab by ProWritingAid, we're exploring George R.R. Martin's formula for building villains that audiences love to hate and hate to love. Let's go. Hi, I'm Hayley Milliman, an author, writing teacher, and editor with more than 15 years of experience helping writers craft stories that captivate readers. And let me tell you, villains are one of my absolute favorite parts of storytelling. The best villains aren't just evil. They're complex, layered, and impossible to forget. But creating villains that are that powerful is no easy feat as a writer. I have often struggled with creating antagonists that feel real and not cartoonish. Maybe that's something you can relate to too. That's why today we're diving into George R.R. Martin's playbook to see what makes his villains so effective and how we can use those techniques to write our own. Let's start with the queen of ruthlessness herself, Cersei Lannister. At first glance, Cersei is power-hungry, manipulative, and unapologetically brutal. But if you look a bit closer, you'll see a character driven by fear, love, and the desire to survive in a world that is stacked against her. And here's something surprising. Some of Cersei's most ruthless acts come from a twisted form of love. In A Feast for Crows, Cersei reflects on the limited power afforded to her as a woman. Everywhere she turned, men ruled. It was as though the gods had condemned her to be a bystander in her own life. This resentment fuels Cersei's drive to dominate Westeros, not simply for power's sake, but to assert herself in a world that refuses to acknowledge her worth. There's an even darker layer to Cersei's ambition, one that's tied to her children. In A Storm of Swords, Cersei says, "Love is a poison. A sweet poison, yes, but it will kill you all the same." Cersei's actions, poisoning, scheming, betraying, they all stem from this twisted form of love. Everything Cersei does is to protect her family, no matter how ruthless it makes her. But here's where things get fascinating. Is Cersei really protecting her family, or is she just using them to justify her own ambition? Stick with me and we'll circle back to that question later. First, let's revisit Cersei's most infamous moment of humiliation, her walk of atonement through the streets of King's Landing. Stripped naked and paraded through the jeering crowd, Cersei is forced to endure the ultimate public shaming. It's a really shocking scene, one that forces the audience to grapple with an unsettling mix of emotions. Yes, Cersei is ruthless, but in that moment, many viewers feel her pain. George R.R. Martin's ability to humanize Cersei, to show her vulnerability beneath that ruthless exterior, creates a sense of empathy that's really difficult to ignore. We might despise her actions, but when Cersei is stripped of her armor, literally and figuratively, it's impossible not to see her as a human being. This empathy was so powerful that it extended beyond the screen. The actress Hannah Waddingham, who played Septa Unella, the nun chanting shame at Cersei during the walk, faced real-world backlash. Some fans directed their hatred for that fictional moment toward her, screaming shame at Waddingham in person and even pelting her with tomatoes. It's a testament to how deeply Martin's characters resonate with audiences, and how well they blur the line between hero and villain. What makes Cersei compelling isn't her cruelty, it's the why behind it. Her deep fear of losing power and love drives her. And while Cersei's methods are horrifying, her motivations are understandable. Cersei is both a product of her environment and a force of nature against it. To create a Cersei-like villain, give them relatable motivations rooted in fear or love. Even if their actions are villainous, their humanity will make them unforgettable. Next, let's look at Jaime Lannister, who starts as one of the most hated characters in the entire series, and ends as one of the most complex. At first, Jaime is positioned as a classic villain. In the very first episode of Game of Thrones, he commits an unthinkable act, pushing young Bran Stark out of a tower window to protect his secret relationship with his sister, Cersei. This is not just an act of violence. It's a calculated decision to preserve Jaime's family's power at any cost. When you add to that his swaggering arrogance, his cutting wit, and that infamous reputation as the Kingslayer, it's no wonder so many fans despised him. But as the series progresses, we see that Jaime is far more than the sum of his worst moments. In A Storm of Swords, we're given his perspective on the act that earned him the Kingslayer title. He was going to burn them all, the whole city, and every man, woman, and child with it. So I killed him. This revelation reframes Jaime, not as a man of selfish ambition, but as someone who broke his vows to save thousands of innocent lives. It's a moral gray area that forces us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about him. But here's the twist. Even though Jaime is haunted by this act, he also takes a kind of pride in it. What does that contradiction say about Jaime, and why does it make him so compelling? We'll get to that in just a minute. Later, after losing his sword hand, a defining part of his identity, Jaime reflects on who he was and who he's becoming. I was that boy with the golden sword who couldn't bear to see a man unhorsed. I'm not that boy anymore. This moment of vulnerability forces us to see Jaime not as a swaggering knight, but as a deeply flawed, introspective man searching for purpose beyond his titles. Jaime's transformation resonated so deeply with fans that when the show's finale saw him return to Cersei and die in her arms, many viewers were outraged. Many believed Jaime's arc had been building toward a redemption separate from that toxic relationship with Cersei. The disappointment was so widespread that fans launched petitions demanding a rewrite of the ending, specifically to honor Jaime's character growth and give him a more fitting resolution. That reaction speaks to the power of Jaime's journey, from despised Kingslayer to a man audiences rooted for, despite his flaws. Jaime's complexity comes from his contradictions. He's a man of privilege and arrogance, but also guilt and honor. His journey is one of self-discovery, and his moments of bravery and vulnerability make his morally gray character one of the most beloved in the series. Fans didn't just forgive Jaime's detestable acts. They really wanted his redemption to stick. That's the hallmark of a character who transcends the page or the screen. A villain with a redemption arc becomes memorable because they force readers to grapple with conflicting emotions. Give your villain moments of self-reflection or vulnerability to show their depth. And if you do it well, your audience might just cheer for them, even when they don't deserve it. Another one of Martin's powerful villains is Ramsay Bolton, who is pure chaos and cruelty. Ramsay's sadism is laid bare in moments like this from A Dance with Dragons. If you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention. This line isn't just chilling. It's emblematic of Ramsay's entire philosophy. He's not just evil. He revels in breaking people, both physically and psychologically. But here's the catch. Ramsay isn't a random psychopath. He is terrifyingly deliberate. One of his most horrifying acts is his treatment of Theon Greyjoy, who he renames Reek. Ramsay's justification for this treatment is chilling. A man who has a name can rebuild himself. A man who has no name is no one. By stripping Theon of his identity, Ramsay shows just how deeply he understands the human psyche and how he uses that knowledge to destroy others. And here's the real kicker. Ramsay's unpredictability doesn't just terrorize the characters. It keeps us, the audience, in constant suspense. We'll come back to why that's so effective in just a second. Ramsay's unpredictability makes him terrifying. We don't just hate him, we fear him because we never know what he'll do next. His actions create ripple effects across the entire story, from Theon's arc to Sansa's struggle for survival. A villain like Ramsay works because they shock and destabilize both the characters and the readers. Make your villains unpredictable and give their actions lasting consequences in the story. So, what can we learn from Cersei, Jaime, and Ramsay about writing unforgettable villains? Let's break it down. First, complex motivations. Villains aren't born evil. Dig into their backstory and find the personal stakes that drive their actions. Second, moral ambiguity. Blurring the lines between good and evil makes villains more compelling. Give them traits that make readers question their judgment. Third, humanizing flaws. Vulnerabilities and internal struggles make villains relatable, even if they're irredeemable. Fourth, unpredictability. Keep your readers on edge by making your villains capable of shocking, game-changing actions. 5. Narrative impact. A strong villain doesn't just oppose the hero. They shape the story itself, leaving ripples that last long after they're gone. Now that we've broken down the framework for unforgettable villains, let's put it into action. Imagine we're creating a villain for a gripping crime novel, a mastermind who keeps readers on edge from the first page to the last. Here is how we would do it. Step 1, complex motivations. Our villain, let's call him Victor Kane, isn't committing crimes for the sake of chaos. His backstory reveals a brilliant surgeon whose career was destroyed when he was falsely accused of malpractice. The system Victor once trusted turned its back on him, and now his crimes are a twisted quest for justice, one where he operates outside the law to expose the flaws in it. Step 2, moral ambiguity. Victor isn't entirely wrong. His victims are corrupt officials, greedy CEOs, and others who exploit the system. His methods, brutal. His reasoning, almost sympathetic. Readers will grapple with whether they despise him or secretly hope he succeeds in exposing the truth. Step 3, humanizing flaws. Despite his cold exterior, Victor is haunted by his own actions. He writes letters to the daughter he hasn't seen in years, letters he'll never send, explaining the why behind his crusade. These glimpses into Victor's humanity make him more than just a villain. They make him painfully real. Step 4, unpredictability. Victor's methods are as precise as the surgeries he once performed. One day, it's a cyber attack that exposes a politician's secrets. The next, a dramatic public spectacle that brings a corrupt executive to their knees. The unpredictability of Victor's strikes keeps readers guessing about what he'll do next and how far he'll go. Step 5, narrative impact. Victor's actions don't just challenge the protagonist. They force them to question their own beliefs about justice and morality. As the protagonist closes in on Victor, they realize they're not so different after all. This realization doesn't just shape the plot, it transforms the hero. Now it's your turn. Tell me in the comments, who is your villain? How do they affect your story? Remember this, a great villain doesn't just make us hate them, they make us think. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to like this video and subscribe to StoryLab for more tips to elevate your storytelling. See you next time.